Good evening. Tonight, we delve into a profoundly challenging aspect of international relations and humanitarianism: the global response to refugee crises. The sheer scale of displacement worldwide necessitates robust and sustainable solutions. Yet the path forward is fraught with political and practical difficulties. The specific question we are debating is this: should the United Nations mandate member countries accept a minimum quota of refugees? Joining us are two distinguished speakers with extensive experience. Mr. Kenji Tanaka, formerly with the UNHCR, will argue in favor of mandated quotas. Ambassador Sofia Petrova, a seasoned diplomat, will argue against the proposition. We will begin with opening statements. Mr. Tanaka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. The proposition before us is not merely a policy option. It is a moral and legal imperative stemming from our shared humanity and codified, at least in spirit, in instruments like the 1951 Refugee Convention. The current system, heavily reliant on voluntary contributions and the geographical lottery of where refugees first arrive, is demonstrably failing. We witness neighboring countries, often developing nations themselves, bearing a disproportionate burden, straining their resources and infrastructure to breaking point. This is neither sustainable nor equitable. A mandated quota system introduces a crucial element of predictability and fairness into the equation. It transforms the principle of responsibility sharing from a vague aspiration into a concrete, measurable obligation. Mandating quotas ensures that all member states contribute their fair share, reflecting their capacity, rather than allowing political expediency or geographical distance to dictate involvement. This isn't about eroding sovereignty. It's about acknowledging that certain global challenges, like mass displacement, transcend borders and demand collective action. Such a system would allow for better planning, more organized resettlement processes, and potentially more efficient allocation of international resources to support both refugees and host communities. It moves us away from the current ad hoc, crisis-driven responses towards a more structured, proactive, and ultimately more humane approach. Ignoring this reality, clinging to outdated notions of absolute sovereignty in the face of overwhelming human suffering, is simply untenable. We need to codify these obligations to prevent states from shirking their duties and ensure genuine solidarity in practice, not just in rhetoric.
Thank you, Mr. Tanaka. Ambassador Petrova, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. While Mr. Tanaka speaks with commendable passion about humanitarian ideals, his proposal for mandated quotas, however well-intentioned, founders on the rocks of practicality and political reality. First and foremost, the authority to control borders and determine who resides within a nation's territory is a fundamental attribute of state sovereignty. Imposing external mandates on immigration numbers directly infringes upon this core sovereign prerogative, a principle fiercely guarded by nearly all member states. Beyond the principle, the practical hurdles are immense. How does one devise a fair, objective, and universally acceptable formula for calculating these quotas? Should it be based on GDP, population size, land area, unemployment rates? Each metric is fraught with complexities and potential for dispute. Furthermore, nations possess vastly different absorptive capacities. It's not merely about numbers. It's about the ability to integrate newcomers socially, economically, and culturally. Forcing states to accept refugees beyond their genuine capacity risks creating social friction, undermining public support for refugees, and potentially jeopardizing national security through inadequate vetting processes. We must also acknowledge the domestic political constraints. Governments are accountable to their citizens, and imposing unpopular quotas could lead to significant political backlash, instability, and even the rise of anti-immigrant sentiment. Such prescriptive mandates are inflexible. They fail to account for changing circumstances within a country or the specific needs and profiles of different refugee populations. A more viable approach involves strengthening voluntary resettlement programs, increasing financial assistance to frontline states, investing in regional processing centers, and, crucially, addressing the root causes of displacement through diplomacy and development aid. Imposing quotas is a simplistic answer to a deeply complex problem, one that risks creating more problems than it solves.
Thank you, Ambassador. We now move into our first round of discussion. Mr. Tanaka, Ambassador Petrova raises significant points about sovereignty and practicality. How do you reconcile mandated quotas with a state's right to control its borders and its varying capacity to integrate refugees?
Dr. Reed, the concept of absolute sovereignty is increasingly challenged by the realities of globalization and shared humanitarian crises. International law already places obligations on states regarding non-refoulement and human rights. A quota system isn't about obliterating sovereignty, but about balancing it with collective responsibility, particularly when fundamental human rights are at stake. The argument about absorptive capacity and security concerns, while valid to a point, is often exaggerated or used as a pretext for inaction. With adequate international support, robust screening processes managed collaboratively, and well-planned integration programs, these challenges are manageable. The difficulty in establishing criteria shouldn't paralyze us. We develop complex international agreements constantly. A multi-factor index considering economic strength, population density, and potentially historical contributions could be negotiated. The alternative is the current chaos, where proximity dictates burden, which is inherently unfair and unsustainable.
Ambassador Petrova, your response to Mr. Tanaka's points on sovereignty being balanced by responsibility and the manageability of capacity and security concerns?
Mr. Tanaka downplays the very real-world complexities. While international norms exist, they do not extend to compelling states to accept specific numbers of non-citizens for permanent resettlement against their will. The manageability he speaks of glosses over significant costs, financial, social, and political. Integration isn't just about finding housing and jobs. It involves education systems, healthcare, social services, and fostering community cohesion, all of which require immense, long-term investment and societal willingness. Furthermore, establishing and monitoring compliance with such quotas would require an intrusive international bureaucracy, likely to be resisted by many states. The political unviability in many democratic nations cannot be overstated. Governments risk being voted out of office if they are perceived as ceding control over immigration to an international body. This isn't about exaggeration. It's about acknowledging the tangible constraints and potential negative repercussions, including the risk of fostering resentment that ultimately harms refugees already within a country. A system that ignores these realities is destined to fail, potentially undermining the very international cooperation it seeks to promote.
Let's move to the practicalities. Mr. Tanaka, how would such quotas realistically be calculated and, crucially, enforced? What mechanisms would ensure compliance, especially from states unwilling or claiming incapacity?
Calculation, as I mentioned, could involve a composite index, perhaps weighted. Factors like GDP per capita, population density, existing refugee populations, and even land area could be considered negotiated through a UN framework. Enforcement is undoubtedly challenging, but not insurmountable. Compliance could be linked to other aspects of UN participation or international standing. Perhaps access to certain development funds, participation in specific international initiatives, or even reputational indices could be tied to meeting obligations. Peer pressure within the international community can also be a powerful tool. We could establish an independent body under UN auspices to monitor compliance, verify data, and provide technical assistance to countries struggling to meet their quotas. Political will is the key ingredient.
Ambassador Petrova, your perspective on these proposed mechanisms for calculation and enforcement, do you see them as feasible or fraught with peril?
With respect, Mr. Tanaka's proposals sound more like theoretical constructs than workable solutions. Any composite index would be endlessly debated, with states inevitably arguing that the metrics chosen disadvantage them unfairly. The potential for data manipulation, underreporting GDP, exaggerating existing burdens, is significant. Verification would be incredibly complex and politically charged. Linking compliance to development aid or other benefits essentially punishes nations, potentially harming their own vulnerable populations, for failing to meet a contested quota. This creates perverse incentives and deepens resentment. Furthermore, numbers alone ignore the qualitative aspects of integration. A country might technically meet a quota but fail utterly in providing meaningful support or protection, leading to ghettoization or secondary displacement. Crucially, there are no successful large-scale precedents for mandatory international quotas of this nature. Voluntary systems, while imperfect, at least operate on consent. Coercion in this domain is likely to backfire spectacularly. There is also the danger that quotas become ceilings, not floors. States might do the bare minimum required and feel absolved of any further responsibility, even in dire crises.
We now turn to closing statements. Ambassador Petrova, please summarize your position.
Thank you. The proposal for UN-mandated refugee quotas, while born from a desire for a fairer system, is fundamentally flawed. It represents an unacceptable infringement upon national sovereignty, a cornerstone of the international order. Its practical implementation is beset by insurmountable obstacles: the impossibility of devising a universally accepted calculation formula, the vast differences in national capacities for integration, and the very real security concerns that states must manage. Attempting to impose such a system risks severe political backlash within member states, potentially destabilizing governments, and eroding public goodwill towards refugees altogether. This one-size-fits-all approach ignores the complex realities on the ground. It substitutes bureaucratic targets for genuine, context-specific solutions. True progress lies in strengthening voluntary cooperation, providing substantial financial and technical support to frontline states, enhancing diplomatic efforts to resolve conflicts that cause displacement, and investing in sustainable development globally. Let us pursue pragmatic, cooperative solutions that respect national sovereignty while genuinely advancing refugee protection, rather than imposing a mandate destined for failure and acrimony.
Thank you, Ambassador. Mr. Tanaka, your closing statement.
Thank you. Ambassador Petrova speaks of pragmatism, but the current pragmatic system is failing millions. It is chaotic, inequitable, and often inhumane, leaving refugees in protracted limbo and overburdening a handful of nations. Mandated quotas are not about idealism divorced from reality. They are about injecting necessary structure, fairness, and predictability into our collective response. They operationalize the principle of shared responsibility that is already enshrined in international discourse. The challenges of calculation, enforcement, and integration are real, but they are technical and political obstacles to be overcome through negotiation and commitment, not insurmountable barriers justifying inaction. To invoke sovereignty as an absolute shield against shared responsibility in the face of mass displacement is to misunderstand its place in the 21st century, and to ignore our profound moral obligations. A quota system, properly designed and supported, offers a pathway towards a more orderly, manageable, and dignified process for refugees and states alike. It replaces the cruelty of chance with the predictability of obligation. Let us find the political courage to build a system that reflects our shared humanity, acknowledging that the burden of displacement must be borne collectively, not left to the whims of geography or the fluctuations of voluntary sentiment. The status quo is unacceptable. We must strive for something better, something fairer.
Thank you, Mr. Tanaka, and thank you, Ambassador Petrova, for a rigorous and enlightening debate. You have clearly articulated the core tension between the humanitarian imperative for collective action and equitable burden sharing, and the principles of national sovereignty and the practical challenges of implementation. Your insights have given our audience much to consider on this critical global issue. This concludes our discussion.